Invincible's rush to the hospital. The fight had shown him the true brutality of the world, that even heroes could fall when faced with forces far beyond their league. Kakarot stood silently at the hospital's window. His expression was grim. He had witnessed his brother nearly die before his eyes. Though his same blood yearned for challenge, what he felt during that fight wasn't thrilling. It was fury, pure, consuming anger. Days passed. When Mark finally recovered and returned to school, things felt almost normal, at least on the surface. But beneath that smile, doubt gnawed at him. Was he really strong enough to protect anyone? William then mentioned that he'd be heading to Upstate University for a tour with Rick, a boy he liked. He was nervous but excited, and Mark saw opportunity to escape the weight of being invincible for a day. He suggested tagging along with Amber, hoping to relax and reconnect with her after everything that had happened. Kakarot, however, declined. He told them to have fun, offering a reassuring grin before walking off. On the surface, it seemed like he just wanted some time alone, but the truth was more complicated. The events of Machine Head had also shaken him to the core, not because of fear, but because of realization. Battle Beast, the alien warrior who had nearly killed Mark, wasn't even fighting at his full strength, and yet Kakarot had been pushed, not defeated, but challenged. The realization burned inside him. He needed to grow stronger. Later that afternoon, as Kakarot sat in his room, he heard a soft knock on his window. It was Eve. She greeted him with a smile. Eve asked about Mark, and Kakarot told her that Mark had gone on a university trip. Then with curiosity, he asked her what she was planning to do next. College maybe? Her answer caught him off guard. She said she wasn't going to college at all. Not because she couldn't, but because she didn't want to waste time pretending to help people on paper when she could actually help them right now. Kakarot listened carefully, nodding as she spoke. Most people wouldn't have understood her decision, but he did. She was doing something he had done all his life, using power not for pride, but to protect, to serve, to make things better. He told her that they were a lot alike. Not heroes who fought for fame, but individuals who fought because they had to, because it was the right thing to do. Night came. Nolan finally returned. His expression was unreadable, but his wife, Debbie, was waiting. She was furious, broken by suspicion and fear. She had found his suit, bloody, damaged, and hidden. She confronted him, demanded answers. Nolan denied it. His tone was calm but detached, and that only fueled her rage. She threw a bottle of wine at him, Nolan catching it. He called her drunk, and her response was filled with venom and despair. The man she loved was lying to her face. He clenched his fist. In a sudden flash of anger, he shattered the empty bottle in his hand, punching a hole straight to the wall. The next morning, Eve and Kakarot woke up in her treehouse in the deep woods. She made them coffee, the two side by side, watching the horizon. But elsewhere, Debbie was waking to a nightmare. She came downstairs to find Nolan waiting for her. The tension was suffocating. She asked him again why he kept his suit. His answer was practice, deliberate. He said he used it to take care of Damien Darkblood, the demon detective who had been investigating him, but then his tone shifted. He suggested that maybe he wanted her to find it. Maybe it was time for her to know the truth. He told her he hadn't been blackmailed, that he could have told her everything months ago, that he wanted to. He asked her to trust him. But Debbie couldn't, not anymore. Tears filled her eyes as she told him she couldn't trust a man who murdered their friends. Nolan tried to justify it. He didn't have a choice, that everything he had done was necessary. She screamed at him to get out of her house. Without another word, Nolan's eyes narrowed. He turned away a hole straight through the ceiling and flew off into the sky. Debbie tried to calm herself, clutching the phone. Her hands trembled when she dialed the number, Kakarot's, but there was no answer. Mark, no answer. Back at the Grayson home, agents suddenly made their presence known. The Global Defense Agency had arrived. Donald, Cecil's trusted operative, looked at her with an expression of mixed sympathy and duty. He told her she needed to come with them for her safety. Her husband, Omni-Man, the most powerful being on Earth, had become their greatest threat. And somewhere out there, Kakarot and Mark still didn't know what was happening. After weeks of suspicion and fear, the truth about Nolan Grayson, Omni-Man, was on the verge of exposure. Debbie Grayson sat in the sterile halls of the Gold Defense Agency. Her heart pounded in her chest. She wanted answers. When Cecil Stedman appeared, she demanded to know why he had kept Nolan's secret from her, why he hadn't warned her about the monster living under her roof. Cecil, ever the tactician, didn't flinch. He told her the truth, or at least a version of it. They couldn't risk Nolan finding out they knew, not until they understood his motives, not until they knew how to stop him. Omni-Man wasn't just another superhuman. He was a Viltrumite. He was an alien, a god among men. And even worse, he was angry. Cecil's voice grew quiet as he admitted something chilling. There might be only two people alive who could fight Omni-Man and stand a chance. Mark and Kakarot. But when he asked where they were, Debbie's voice trembled. She told him that it wouldn't happen. She couldn't bear the thought of her sons fighting their own father. While she struggled with fear and grief, miles away, Nolan was preparing for something far different. He rehearsed how he would tell his sons the truth, that he had killed the guardians of the globe. He convinced himself it was his duty, his responsibility, that Mark and Kakarot, his sons, would understand why he had done it. But Nolan's calm facade cracked when he arrived home and found the house empty. His eyes darted across the silent rooms and until he spotted movement. The agent barely had time to react before Omni-Man's hand gripped his armor and slammed him onto the floor. The shockwave rattled the entire house. More agents opened fire, their bullets ricocheting effortlessly off his skin. Nolan's fear ignited. He tore through them like paper, every move precise, calculated, and brutal. One agent reached for something. He reached for a house across the street. His eyes burned with rage. He walked straight past the drywall and entered the room with monitors. Donald, the low GTA agent, stood his ground as Omni-Man confronted him. Donald explained that the house had been for their protection, that they were trying to keep Debbie and the boy safe. Nolan's expression twisted into disgust. He told Donald that he had always been pathetic, weak, and with a swift movement, Nolan crushed Donald's spine. As he fell, Donald's voice echoed through the comms, his last words steady and loyal. He had told Cecil it had been an honor, and triggered the detonator. The house exploded in a brilliant flash of fire and debris, the shockwaves shaking the nearby streets. From the GA command center, Debbie covered her mouth in shock as she watched the explosion unfold. Cecil stood beside her, eyes narrowed, jaw tight. Debbie turned to him, voice trembling. She said that Nolan would find Mark and Kakarot next, and didn't know what he would do when he did. Cecil nodded grimly. They had to find that before Nolan did. Mark flew alongside Eve, and Kakarot joined them soon after. But that peace wouldn't last. William was driving home from his university trip. The wind roared, the car shook, and a shadow descended beside him. It was Omni-Man. His cape fluttered in the wind as his boots touched down on the road. William stammered out a greeting, asking if he was okay, but Nolan didn't answer. His tone was flat, cold. He wanted to know where Mark was. William told him that Mark had gone with Eve. The car groaned under Nolan's tightening grip as his hand pressed against the hood, leaving a deep dent in the metal. He gave up Eve's location, desperate to make him leave, and just like that, Nolan shot into the sky. Cecil stared at the monitors, watching the dots on the radar screen. One green for Mark, one orange for Kakarot, and one pink for Eve. And one red, racing towards them with impossible speed, was Omni-Man. 6 minutes out, they needed to buy time, and Cecil had just the weapon to do it. High above Earth's orbit, a massive satellite came to life. The GDA's orbital defense cannon. A barrel began to glow, channeling a beam of pure destructive light. A colossal beam of energy descended from orbit, striking him dead on. The force shook the planets, vaporizing everything in a mile-wide radius. The shockwave leveled entire sections of the forest. Animals scattered in panic, only to be consumed by the roaring inferno. A figure emerged from the smoke. Omni-Man stood tall in the center of the crater, his eyes burning with unrestrained fury. He wiped blood from his nose and looked up towards the sky. The satellite fired again, and this time no one didn't even try to dodge. He flew straight to the beam, ripping through the energy and destroying the satellite with one punch. Back at the GDA headquarters, the room fell silent. Cecil exhaled sharply, muttering that 400 billion was just spent for a nosebleed. Nolan is attacked by Sinclair's cyborgs, which put up a fight with him, but he tries to get them off. He fights the monsters and rips them apart. Debbie buried her face in her hands. Omni-Man was unstoppable, and he was still coming. Mark and Eve had no idea the man flying toward them wasn't coming to protect them, and Kakarot, the same protector of Earth, was about to face his greatest test yet, because even for someone like him, fighting a Viltrumite wasn't just another battle. It was a war of ideologies, a clash of two beings who had been born for conquest. yet chose two very different paths. One fought for the love of the game, the other fought for dominance. Nolan Grayson soared through the skies. He locked eyes with yet another beast rising from destruction. It was the same creature he had claimed to slay before, but something was different this time. The monster moved faster and his blows were harder. Two news helicopters circled overhead, broadcasting the fight live across the globe. Civilians, heroes, and government officials all watched as Omni-Man engaged the monster with explosive force. Every punch sent shockwaves through the air. Nolan struck the creature in the gut. The monster retaliated instantly. The Omni-Man's breath grew ragged as he tried to regain altitude, but the creature's claws hooked around his throat, dragging him down again. Eve, still in the air, got a call from an unknown number. It was from Debbie. The panic was unmistakable. Debbie tells her to get to safety. But Cease's tone was grim when he communicated with Eve. He ordered her not to help them, not to interfere. The monster wasn't the real threat now. He needed her at the Guardians HQ immediately. Reluctantly, she turned away. Nolan, Mark, and Kakarot stood together, fighting against the towering monster below. The creature rose again, roaring with renewed ferocity. The air exploded as the three heroes collided with it. Omni-Man struck first, driving his fist through the creature's chest and tearing through bone. Kakarot followed, striking its spine with a burst of ki that burned through its hide. Mark came in last, driving it into the ground force. Together, the three unleashed a storm of power. Kakarot's energy being shredded to the creature's limbs. Omni-Man tore through his organs, and Mark drove blow after blow into its head. The kaiju thrashed, roaring in blind rage until finally, after one last earth-shattering impact, it went still. The monster lay motionless, its body charred and broken. Smoke and blood filled the air. For a moment there was silence. Mark smiled, breathing heavily, ready to celebrate. He looked to his father, expecting approval, pride, anything, but Nolan wasn't looking at him. His expression was blank. It was cold. Then, before any of them could speak, a blur streaked across the sky. Immortal crashed into the scene like a meteor, his roar echoing. His fear was unmatched. Without hesitation, he launched himself at Omni-Man, raining down blows with fueled pure rage. The ground splintered beneath them. Kakarot floated back, confusion flashing across his face. He didn't understand. He could sense the fear in Immortal strikes, the betrayal in his words. He heard accusations, claims that Omni-Man had murdered the Guardians of the Globe. Mark froze. The words didn't make sense. His father, the hero who had taught him everything, couldn't have done something like that, could he? Kakarot's fist clenched. His instincts screamed at him that something was wrong. He'd fought beside Omni-Man, trusted him, respected his power, but now, as the two titans tore into each other, there was no honor, no restraint, only bloodlust. Immortal's strength was immense, but Omni-Man's fury was greater. He caught Immortal mid-strike, twisted, and drove his arm clean straight to the veteran hero's chest. The sound was sickening. Kakarot and Mark watched that in horror as Omni-Man lifted Immortal's body high, then tore it apart with savage force. Blood rained down like a crimson storm. The news helicopters caught everything, the violence, the gore, the undeniable truth. The world watched as Omni-Man, Earth's greatest protector, slaughtered one of his oldest heroes in cold blood. Kakarot's aura flickered violently. His power surged, his emotions spiraling. Every fiber in his being screamed to intervene, to stop this madness. But Mark stood frozen beside him, paralyzed by disbelief. Nolan turned to them, his face soaked in blood. For a moment, the three stood there in silence. Then Nolan spoke. He told them that they needed to talk. Mark's heart broke. Kakarot's fury burned harder than ever. Above them, the cameras continued rolling. Across the globe, people stared at their screens in shock and terror. The truth about Omni-Man was no longer hidden. The perfect image of Earth's mightiest hero had crumbled, and in its place stood a monster, a conqueror. But floating in front of him were two wild cards, a son torn between love and betrayal, and a sane warrior whose sense of justice would not allow what he had just witnessed to go unchallenged. Omni-Man floated there silent. His expression was a mixture of regret and grim resolve. He tried to reach his sons to explain, but Mark was too far gone. His entire world was just shattered. Mark lunged forward, his fist charged with fury. Omni-Man dodged effortlessly, avoiding Mark's strikes. He tried to reason with him, to calm him down. Kakarot stepped in between them, his aura flaring, warning his father to stop. Then Nolan said it. The words that broke everything. He admitted it. He wasn't being controlled. He wasn't under influence. He had done it all, of his own will. Nolan began to explain about Viltrum, about their mission, about the empire that had conquered countless worlds across the galaxy. He told them of the Purge, how the weak were slaughtered, leaving only the strong to rebuild. He told them that they were never meant to save Earth, they were meant to rule it. Mark's heart sank. Every memory, every moment with his father twisted into something ugly. The man who had taught him to protect people was only preparing him to dominate them. Omni-Man tried to rationalize with them. To him, it was all for the greater good. The unification of Earth under Viltrumite rule. Resistance was pointless, he said. Humans were fragile, fleeting. They would die in a blink of an eye while they lived for thousands of years. To Nolan, this was destiny. But when he spoke of Debbie, of how he still loved her, yet called her a pet, that was the breaking point. Mark's body trembled. The rage he'd been holding back erupted. He shouted that he would never be part of his father's empire, that he'd rather die than seeing Earth fall under Viltrumite rule, and beside him, Kakarot stood still, eyes burning with defiance. He declared his loyalty to Earth, not because he was born here, not because he chose it, raised as a human, taught compassion and courage. He wasn't the weapon Nolan wanted, he was a protector, and he died before letting anyone, even his own father, take that away. Omni-Man sighed, the last bit of warmth leaving his voice. His fist clenched, realized that there was no point of turning them. They were lost in human ideals, so he gave into his nature. The battle began. Omni-Man struck first, his fist crashing into Mark's chest and setting him through mountains of clouds. Kakarot flew in immediately, his body blazing with energy as he entered his Akari form. Mark rejoined the fight, diving from above to catch Nolan in the jaw. The three tore across the skies, punching through clouds, smashing into mountains, and carving destruction into the landscape below. Cecil, watching from the GDA, activated emergency measures. He sent jets to intercept, hoping to slow Nolan down. It was a desperate attempt. As they fought, Mark tried to reason with his father. He begged him to stop, to remember who he was, a man who saved people, who cared for Earth. But Nolan's heart was stone. To him, compassion was weakness. The jets arrived, unleashing everything they had, missiles straight to the air, explosion filled the horizon. But Nolan barely flinched. One by one, he destroyed them effortlessly. When the smoke cleared, only one pilot ejected, parachuting towards the ground. Mark rushed to catch him, saving him before he could hit the earth. For a brief moment, he felt relief until Nolan appeared beside him. With cold precision, Nolan crushed the pilot's skull like it was glass. Cecil could only watch in silence. Debbie's tears streamed down her face as she saw the true monster her husband had become. Kakarot snapped. His aura exploded outward, the glowing flames around him burned brighter, hotter. His muscles tightened, the ground beneath him cracking as energy surged. His roar shook the heavens. Omni-Man turned just in time to see his son's transformation. The golden-haired warrior that emerged wasn't the rowdy Kakarot he'd raised alongside Mark. This was something primal, something ancient. His eyes shone an icy blue, piercing through Nolan's confidence. In a blink, he was gone, moving faster than Nolan could track. The next movement, his fist slammed into Nolan's chest, sending the Viltrumite flying through the air like a meteor. The two collided again and again, shockwaves ripping through the sky. Kakarot unleashed a barrage of blows, each one heavier than the last. Nolan countered, but his strikes were weaker, slower, his composure slipping as Kakarot's fury intensified. On the ground below, Invincible could barely comprehend the power on display. He'd seen his brother fight before, but never like this. It was pure, unfiltered rage. Nolan spat blood, smiling grimly as he wiped the blood from his chin. He realized that Kakarot was no ordinary warrior. Omni-Man knew that whatever Kakarot was, it was not to be underestimated. He was a Saiyan, a warrior from another race of conquerors, one that thrived off of battle, and yet, unlike the Viltrumites, he'd chosen compassion over conquest. That made him something far more dangerous. Kakarot's aura flared again, his hand glowing with condensed energy. He shaped it into a blade of pure ki. He charged, ready to end it. The blade cut through the air towards Nolan's heart. But before he could land a final strike, Mark intervened. He shouted, reminded Kakarot who he was, a hero, not an executioner. Kakarot froze, his breathing heavy. He looked down on his father, bloodied and broken on the ground below. His anger began to fade, replaced by exhaustion and sorrow. His golden aura dimmed, the glow leaving his eyes. His hair fell back to black. The Super Saiyan was gone. Nolan lay motionless in the crater. GDA agents arrived, Nolan barely conscious, was contained and restrained using bindings. The world watched as the once great protector of Earth was taken away in silence. Cecil ordered his imprisonment in a reinforced chamber deep beneath the agency, surrounded by layers of energy dampeners. Debbie refused to see him. Mark couldn't bring himself to visit, but Kakarot did. He stared down the broken warrior that was his father. There was no anger left, only sadness. Despite everything, Kakarot understood one truth. Nolan wasn't just a villain. He was a man consumed by the ideals of his own people, a man who believed that conquest was destiny. A few days after the imprisonment of Nolan Grayson, the vastness of space called once more. Invincible was sent to the moon to meet a known ally, Alan the Alien, the Coalition evaluation officer. Alan had returned. Back on Earth, Kakarot and Mark visited their father, Nolan, in a reinforced cell. The reunion was tense, filled with unspoken questions and fragile trust. Nolan, for the first time, expressed a measure of humility. He apologized to his sons, acknowledging that Earth had changed him. He admitted he had not been ready to accept the truth of humanity, its resistance, or the value of individual choice. For a moment, the man who once embodied the Viltrumite ideal of conquest seemed smaller, more human. Mark, absorbing the weight of his father's confession, shared with him that he had learned about the Coalition of Planets. He told Nolan about their structure, their reach, and their plan to resist Viltrumite expansion. He spoke of the potential support in the inevitable rebellion. Nolan listened quietly, the weight of his past actions pressing down on him. For the first time, Nolan considered a future where his power could be used differently, not for domination but for protection. He realized that despite his own history, they had inherited something he had truly never understood: the courage to fight for something greater than themselves. Nolan made a choice. He would join the Coalition in their cause. His knowledge of Viltrumite tactics, their strategies, and their weaknesses made him a valuable asset. He could not undo his past, nor erase the lives lost under his command, but he could ensure that others did not suffer the same fate.